So, we have a problem. This AMD Wraith Spire cooler cools, but the RGB ring doesn't work. So, it needs to be shipped back to AMD for a repair or warranty replacement. But we can't run the computer without a cooling solution. That's where this bad boy comes in. This is a DeepCool Gammax 400, sandwiched between two Be Quiet Pure Wings 2 fans. As such, this isn't going to be a review of this particular product, because we aren't running it stock, but more of a guide on how to successfully swap out a CPU cooler, and testing the difference between the Gammax 400 with good fans and the Wraith Spire. Before removing a CPU cooler, you want to run the machine for a little bit, power it down, remove the power cord, and hold down the power button for a few seconds to drain all the charge from the components. The reason you want to run the machine before removing the CPU cooler is that cold thermal paste, especially if it's old thermal paste, can act like glue and damage components. After that, you begin unscrewing the mounting mechanism. As you can see, the second screw I'm going for is diagonal from the first, to try and keep as even tension as possible across the motherboard. This one came off nice and easy as the tension was lifted. But should a CPU cooler ever put up resistance to being removed, don't yank up on it. You want to twist it back and forth to break the thermal paste sealing it to the CPU, and it should pop off. Next, I'm unplugging the RGB cable from the Wraith Spire and the motherboard, and disconnecting the fan header from the motherboard. This can be done prior to loosening the mounting screws, but doing it this way was more convenient because of the layout of this computer. Now, I'm lifting the retention arm of the CPU socket to remove the processor, because our next step is to clean the thermal paste off of the processor's heat spreader and the bottom of the CPU cooler. We're cleaning the CPU cooler because I'm sending it into AMD for an RMA, and giving them a filthy component is just rude. And we're cleaning up the CPU because if you don't do that whenever you're switching out thermal paste, there's a chance of ridges and air pockets forming when you seat the new cooler. When you clean components such as these, you want to use isopropyl alcohol to cut the thermal grease, and you want to use coffee filters for a cleaning cloth because they're lint-free and can't carry a static charge. You want to use a few drops of isopropyl alcohol at a time to ensure you don't use too much, and get liberal with when to use a new coffee filter. You don't want to go smearing old thermal paste back onto the component. With our Ryzen 1700 all cleaned up and reseated, it's time to apply new thermal paste. How exactly you want to add the thermal paste is down to personal style. I prefer to use a pea-sized blob in the middle of the heat spreader, but opinions are like buttholes in that everyone's got one. So feel free to argue about how a line down the middle or an X shape are the only acceptable ways to do it in the comments below. Now comes the struggle. Despite the DeepCool Gammax 400's stellar cooling performance, it's on par with DeepCool's Captain AIO liquid cooler, it's a bitch to install. I couldn't get a good camera angle on it, but the mounting bracket comes with 4 push pins that go into holes around the CPU. You push them through the holes, then twist to lock them in place. You then use the metal lever in the bottom to clip the upper part of the cooler to the retention bracket so it stays put. Then there's a smaller latch on the other side. These are the same clear, concise instructions given with the cooler's documentation in picture form, but in practice it's 10 minutes of wrestling your computer in something akin to a WWE cage match. My recommendation is to pay a little extra for Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo. The cooler itself is a very similar design to the Gammax 400, but the mounting mechanism doesn't cause a Lovecraftian descent into madness. Under full load, which I accomplished using Prime 95's maximum heat test and leaving the computer run for half an hour, the Wraith Spire hit a maximum sustained temperature of 29.3 degrees Celsius over room temperature, and maximum sustained temperature for the Gammax 400 was 20.9 degrees Celsius over room temperature. These are both impressive drops, achieved because the fin stack on the Gammax 400 is over twice as tall than on the Spire, because the fan configuration simultaneously blasts cold air across the cooler, while also pulling air off the fin stack to be blown off the back of the computer. This is the third Gammax 400 I've installed, the first two being on an i7-6700K and an i7-7700K, back when I was still using the original Thermaltake Ring 12 fans. Sandwiching a cooler like this in line with your rear exhaust fan creates an extremely effective wind tunnel, which will guarantee a lot of overclocking headroom, should you choose to use it. Like this video and subscribe to the Test Bench. Feel free to join us on Facebook. Back us on Patreon if you want to help us show you more cool stuff. And follow us on Twitter, regardless of whichever of those things you do or don't do. Thanks for watching.